Good afternoon, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our live webinar, Harnessing the Benefits of Blockchain for Ireland and Europe. I was delighted to initiate this event and bring key stakeholders together for what I know will be a cutting-edge discussion on the future of blockchain in Ireland and indeed across Europe. Time and again, I see this topic emerging during my work in the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee in the European Parliament, and I think it's a good time to have the discussion. And I want to warmly welcome you on behalf of myself and my office, and indeed the European Parliament Liaison office in Dublin. Thank you to all of them. So you're very welcome to the event. It's great to see so many people are taking part in this. We have representatives from a very wide range of organisations: accountancy, legal, industry, banking, media, and so on, as well as representatives from the Public Service, the European Commission, and other Irish state agencies. In terms of our programme today, very shortly, we'll hear from our Minister Paschal Donohue. That's a keynote address on the future of blockchain in Ireland and Europe. We will then hear from Sakhib Waseem of the Proof of Trust, Elaine Coughlan of Atlantic Bridge, David Wachsman of Wachsman Consultancy, Maya Santamaria from the Department of Finance and Block W, and by Peteris Zilgavis of the European Commission. So a great range of speakers and experts in the area. Just to make sense first, to say that a recent article in the Irish Times, very good title, Beyond Bitcoin, Blockchain Will Change Finance, Science and the World. Quite a claim. Very interesting article. One of the first lines in it: blockchain technology is heralding in a fairer world. Interesting point for the discussion, is it? The EU believes that blockchain, when properly used, can bring enormous benefits to our economy, our industries, and indeed to European society as a whole. And there's a very interesting paper I've just been looking at, how blockchain technology could change our lives, from the European Parliament Research Centre. So a good time to discuss this. The financial sector has more than a decade-long history of applying blockchain to its services and activities. And as we know, it has a deep association with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. But of course, it's not just Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies that stand to benefit. It can be applied in a multitude of ways for the common good. These days, blockchain is as likely to be applied to validate the origins of organic foods or to match sick people with a clinical trial. Really interesting areas, as it is to secure trading of cryptocurrencies. And also can be used as an anti-fraud mechanism. And of course, in the Parliament, we're doing a lot of work on anti-money laundering as well with new initiatives. So a lot of opportunity, challenges as well in terms of regulation and the kind of legal clarity that will be needed, and very challenging questions, I think, for governments in relation to policy development. We've seen the new regulation of crypto assets, the MiCA regulation, and the pilot regime and distributed ledger technology. So that's for the benefit of market participants, including consumers and investors. And how do we protect investors and consumers? All of these are questions. Minister Donohue and his department have been following the developments in blockchain very closely, particularly through the creation of interdepartmental working group to monitor further developments in the areas of virtual currencies and blockchain technology. And this, of course, is Blockchain Ireland Week. So there's been a lot of discussion, and I hope today will add to the discussions you've already had this week. Our first speaker, as I said, is Minister Paschal Donohue. Absolutely delighted to have Paschal joining us this afternoon, I should say. Having served in this position since 2017, he was reappointed to this role in 2020, Minister for Finance for Ireland. And from 2016 to 2020, he served as Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. He was previously Minister for Transport and Tourism and Sport and Minister for European Affairs. So he's a lot of experience of government, and it'll be very interesting to hear his views on this cutting edge topic, as I say. Minister, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. And I know that you're going to spend as much time with us as you can. So welcome. Look forward to hearing what you have to say.
And Frances, thank you very much for the introduction, and congratulations to you and your team for organising this really timely event on this really important development, both in technology and in finance. And it's become customary to open up events like this by saying that while we appreciate the convenience of being able to do an event like this virtually, we of course all miss the opportunity to be in each other's person and do events like this in a more normal way. But of course, what this event has shown, as do all of the meetings that all of us do now every day, is the need to embrace innovation, embrace technology, not just because of the need to survive, not at all, but also to allow us to do our work, to thrive, to find new ways of engaging and being in contact with each other. And I believe this kind of approach, albeit one that in recent months and over the last year has been driven by necessity, that kind of attitude towards innovation and technology is so important. It's also so important because our embrace of technology and our understanding of the opportunities of the digital economy is also a critical element in how we can further develop and flesh out the single market in Europe. So for all of those reasons, Frances, thanks very much for organising this event, and I look forward to hearing the views both of you and of your panelists. So this event here is of course fitting in with many of the other discussions that are taking place in the Blockchain Ireland Week. And for those of you who are maybe joining this particular webinar outside of that week, let me say a word about the week and emphasise its importance. The central theme of it is blockchain, foundation of trust. And what the week is aiming to do is provide a broad exploration, a commentary, and an evaluation of the breadth of applicability of blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. The event is hosting speakers from all over the world, from Africa to Asia, to Australia, to Europe, of course, and then to the United States. And in that week, and here in Ireland, we are showcasing the use of blockchain in our economy in a wide variety of areas, from ascertaining the provenance of food and agricultural products to, for example, how you can invest in blood stock in a more affordable and transparent way, all the way to more familiar matters of how we can provide integrity and trust in health data. This is an area that's of great personal interest to me and ongoing and real interest from my department. And in 2018, I announced the publication of my department's discussion paper on virtual currencies and blockchain. I also announced the creation of the department's working group on crypto assets. That was 3 years ago. The sector at that point was at a very early stage of development. Now, the last thing I'm looking to do is in any way claim or even be associated with the credit for the growth and the development of the blockchain ecosystem in Ireland. Fabulous work on that, and that has been done by officials in my own department and also by so many leaders within the blockchain sector. But it is worth emphasising just how much has been achieved by so few in such a short period of time. It is an example of the power of collaboration, of the work between the private sector, academia, entrepreneurs, technologists, professionals, and yes, indeed, public bodies. And for this broad community, trust is fundamental on two counts. First, trust brought about by the use of technology, and then secondly, trust in the power of the community, in the power of collaborating voluntarily to shape the nature of the blockchain sector in our country. This ability to engage, the diversity of experience, and the open exchange of ideas has been critical to the fast development of the sector. However, trust in each other and the kind of synergy we have seen will only get you so far. We need to have the right strategic, legislative and operational foundations in place. And with this in mind, I want to mention the Ireland for Finance strategy, which has within it an important pillar of technology and innovation. And then for this year, the Ireland for Finance Action Plan outlines a mechanism for the Industry Advisory Committee to identify, to propose, to discuss legislative changes in the context of a changing operating environment. My department has also committed to meet industry representatives association 3 times a year to discuss EU developments in this sector. We've also announced a new senior officials group on fintech in the Department of Finance to coordinate work, to lay down stronger foundations, to prepare the financial services sector to innovate, to use and to grow with the use of blockchain technology. What we are seeing, as many of your panelists will highlight, is that the digital asset space is becoming increasingly competitive. New challenges are being created for existing legal and supervisory frameworks. As a result, we need to address any perceived ambiguity in the treatment of digital assets. Additionally, we have to bring crypto assets into the regulatory perimeter. And that's why my department is engaging with the EU Commission on the files comprised in the EU's digital finance package. And of course, what is particularly important here is the market in crypto assets regulation. However, as the Programme for Blockchain Ireland demonstrates, technology is and should not be confined to the financial services sector alone. That would be myopic, and it will also do a discredit and indeed a disservice to all of the opportunities being pursued through this technology. So what foundations and mechanisms do we have in Ireland to support startups and SMEs to create and deliver products using blockchain? Are we looking at using and increasing citizens' experiences with public services via blockchain? How can we use technology to go beyond profit maximization strategies to support a circular economy? And are we adequately providing our policymakers with the knowledge needed to assess what is developing so quickly and its impact on our citizens? So this is why our colleague Frances has brought us all here together to continue this debate. And I do hope that today's discussion marks the beginning of many more sessions like this one. And can I just conclude by recognising and thanking Frances for doing this. It's all too typical of her very progressive and ambitious view towards politics and indeed what our country can achieve, that she has spotted this as a really important area of development and a really important area for engagement. And there's no better person who could be leading the debate for us in this area within the EU and the European Parliament than Frances. So thank you again. But it is because of what Frances has recognised and also of what we are aware of about the huge potential benefits of blockchain, about the questions it poses, some of the risks we need to be aware of, and the impact that it could have on the lives of our citizens. It's because of all of those reasons we need to continue to ask questions, we need to continue to debate, we need to adopt faster, and we have to collaborate more. So that's why this is an important week, it's why this is an important session. I thank you all for the opportunity to say a few words, and I hope you have a really good event, and I look forward to hearing some of us. Thank you, Frances.
Thanks very much indeed, Minister, and continued success in your role also, of course, as President of the Euro Group. You're doing a great job there, and continued success, as I say, and thank you for those kind words. And we're going to move on now to hear our next speaker, and our next speaker is Sakhib Waseem. Sakhib is an experienced technology expert in the finance sector and blockchain technology specialist. Sakhib has worked with numerous global financial groups and governments, designing and implementing transformative technology-driven solutions from inception. He leads the design, build, and implementation of new and innovative products at the Proof of Trust, working closely with IBM, their technology development partners. So, Sakhib, you bring huge experience to our session this afternoon. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. Over to you.
Thank you, Frances. I'd like to firstly thank you for inviting myself and the Proof of Trust as an organisation to this esteemed platform. I'd like to start with a small announcement from the Proof of Trust. We are an Irish-based company. We have a very large global footprint, and yes, we do indeed assist governments and corporate clients around the world with cutting-edge blockchain solutions in association with IBM as our technology development partner. And we're delighted today to announce that we're welcoming former EU Commissioner Lord Hill as an addition to our strong team of executive advisors. I'd like to first start by addressing what the post-pandemic world really means for governments and organizations. And it's given a really great opportunity for us to embrace blockchain technology as a whole. As we've seen, the EU has a very impressive strategy to embrace technology in the coming years, and it's being acted upon. But as the world went digital within more or less 24 hours, we've seen some huge disruptions. We've seen major business continuity issues. We've seen a reliance on really robust and scalable and efficient digital systems in government that allow us to, as our minister mentioned, work remotely and securely. But it has also given birth to an acceleration of some very pressing issues related to fraud, data leakage, and being able to quickly scale governmental operations seamlessly. And that's where we can really embrace and utilize blockchain technology. So we at the Proof of Trust are using blockchain to tackle a lot of these issues. And in government, most pertinently, we're using it to eradicate fraud issues, things like VAT, utilizing the power of blockchain to build the blocks and paint a detailed picture around financial flows, not only to identify where issues live and create record on an immutable ledger, but to actually intercept transactions utilizing the power of smart contracts to bring in institutional prowess in a distributed manner to return funds back into healthy financial flows. And that's very important. We talk a lot about the usage of blockchain in the public sense, but the private and permissioned usage of blockchain, it could underpin a new age of technology. And that's exactly what our mission at Proof of Trust is here to do. We use blockchain also to underpin and use it as an immutable record for databases so that we can start to control the permissioning of information whilst ensuring that it's highly validated and highly secure. And we do this to avoid things like data breach. We've seen quite recently in light of HSE's issues. But by utilizing services as Proof of Trust do around the world, you use blockchain to securely store information and control more efficiently than today who has permission to this information and emit the opportunity for it to move outside of that secure system whilst providing great traceability. And utilizing blockchain is really important for data and analytics in government. We can use it to learn from event-based behavior, not only in financial transactions, but in any general approval process too. So as we look at inter-ministry and extra-ministry approval processes for things like grants and funding, we can use blockchain as a permission-based system for the real-time learning and continuous improvement life cycle, so that we've got real-time analytical strategies in government as well that can help us grow exponentially. I'd also like to talk a little bit about public blockchain. As our minister has mentioned prior to me speaking, we've seen a huge surge in the usage of digital assets, which is absolutely phenomenal. And if I may be as bold to say, there are children being born today who in their lifetime, they may not use paper money. Instead, we see this evolution into digital assets, as we've seen around the world. And of course, the European Central Bank and the EU have proposed their strategies, and we've seen successful pilots for things like central bank digital currencies. And this is incredible. We're seeing a growth in this industry that has never seen before. But part of that mission must be to omit risk in new technology. Now, in this age of social media and post-Robinhood and Coinbase era, there is an inherent risk in lack of education and the necessary safeguards for the majority of the public who are exposed to complex financial assets and the risk that is teamed with it. And it's with that that we see the EU and Ireland and other nations leading in the way that they act to protect their citizens without being prohibitive of such an incredible technology advancement, which has significant millions of transactions in the EU every day. And we at the Proof of Trust have the only globally patented system capable of providing a dispute resolution and consumer protection layer at the heart of smart contracts, which underpins a lot of the executable layer within blockchain. And it's onerous of us to work seamlessly together to bring in that institutional trust to blockchain and an entire ecosphere. This application is called Astra, and we're looking forward to releasing this to all the major public blockchains this year, enforcing the EU and Ireland's mission of creating a healthy ecosystem of financial products together. So Frances, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed, Sakhib. A fast view into the future of technology and the potential of blockchain. Thank you so much. Now we go to Elaine Coughlan. Elaine is co-founder of Atlantic Bridge, an Irish HQ global technology business, which has a portfolio of over 80 companies, more than 3,000 people in many sectors, including cybersecurity, semiconductors, software, cloud, and medtech. She's many years of experience in this sector as a founder, as an executive and investor, scaling Irish and European technology companies. She's a board member of Enterprise Ireland and has been named one of Europe's top 50 inspiring women in technology, and indeed here in Ireland as well as one of our top women in technology. I had the pleasure of being on a trade mission with Elaine and saw her work firsthand for Ireland around the world. So Elaine, delighted to welcome you here this morning and to hear your perspective on this topic.
Thanks very much, Frances, for that. Thank you, Frances, for that lovely welcome. And I'm delighted to be here with you and with all your team. Thank you for putting this together. Really important that we foster debate and encourage collaboration and communication on an issue that we really need to bring our citizens, our fellow citizens, along with us. And I think just to something the Minister said there, the last webinar I attended with Frances, it was on care for our elderly and for post-pandemic, and now we move to blockchain, and I see the link between the two in Frances's efforts, because it is about fundamentally doing good and using technology as a force for good. And my own interest in blockchain stems from that, my day job as founder of Atlantic Bridge, and as Frances said, we're investing across Europe, Ireland, the US and Asia, but interestingly also across all stages of the life cycles of companies. So we are commercializing and spinning out a lot of R&D in, I suppose, the sectors of the future and of growth from our universities. And we invest at that stage all the way up to pre-IPO companies. And we have a couple of companies in the blockchain sector, and we have actually, interestingly enough, there's more in the pipeline. And then I'm also on the board of Enterprise Ireland, which is the government agency in Ireland, which has also a really keen interest in this sector. So look, as we look and we come out of this pandemic, a lot of what Waseem said there, you know, the estimates are that blockchain could add potentially 2 trillion of value to the global economies. And if ever we needed to get growth going again and sustainable growth, we need it now. And I think it's interesting to look at where blockchain is in the stage of the hype cycle, the famous hype cycle by blockchain. Now, interestingly enough, on that curve right now with blockchain, we're in the trough of disillusionment. And as bleak and doom and gloom as that sounds, it's actually, interestingly enough, a good phase, because counterintuitively, it's typically at this stage of a technology's evolution when it quietly makes progress and market adoption begins. And based on this stage, you know, we think that it's, the next 2 to 3 years, there will be a significant market expansion adoption of blockchain. Now, in our business, 2 to 3 years, and also I'd say, Frances, in your business in the EU and in the Minister's business, the panel, that's a long time. Sorry, that's not a long time. That's akin to tomorrow. So, and I think obviously the exponential pace of change that the Minister mentioned, if I could bottle that and show you in technology, in these companies, in what our underlying customers are doing around the digitization space, it would, certainly help us to be able to show people why we must move and adapt some of these technologies, just because of the amount of data and the challenges that we're facing, particularly on the security and on the transparency space. Now, obviously, there's been a huge amount of hype, talking about hype on because of Bitcoin, but I believe that's really for blockchain, it's an unfortunate negative distraction. We've got to move beyond that, because a lot of the blockchain applications that I'm excited about are in key sectors like food, hair tracing. We have an Irish company, Aid Tech, which is using blockchain to put transparency in the system for the deployment of aid by governments and donors. The Swedish and the Dutch governments are using blockchain now for their land registry. Malta is using it to issue education credentials to their students built on blockchain. And so these are all applications where you can see it's a force for good. Because as I look at blockchain, the key attributes of blockchain enable trust, security, transparency, and speed. And we know that when we speed things up and we cut time, we cut costs, and we also improve the outcome for our citizens. And I think the other key thing that is happening is that will enable blockchain much more widely is decentralization. Which, if we think about it, all of our current networks and internet today are completely centralized, and including obviously the social media companies with all these massive data sets and massive amounts of centralized data. And it's this centralized approach to the internet and to the network which has enabled the devastation, I suppose, from the recent cyber attacks, both on SolarWinds in the US government, on the US colonial pipeline infrastructure, and indeed very real for us and the Minister and Frances on our own health system here in Ireland, with devastating consequences. So we're seeing in Atlantic Bridge across Europe the emergence of a whole new generation of technology companies that are building networks which prioritize privacy, security, and limiting access to the data. And these are all decentralized networks. And when you think of decentralization, you have to think of blockchain. And I'd say the recent statistics just in Q1, we're going to have David from the US talk later, but there was about 2.5 billion funded into blockchain and cryptocurrencies in Q1. Now, just to put that in context, that's 300 million ahead of the entire amount for 2020. And of course, a huge amount of that funding has gone into the US region. And again, that's our challenge now in Europe. So just to share with you what we're seeing in Ireland, we are a small, passionately European country, but we have very strong fintech and financial services sector. And interestingly, I think if you look at it across Europe, it appears to me that it's the smaller countries that are the faster and the earlier adopters of blockchain. And right now in Ireland, we have Tech Ireland are tracking almost 40 companies that we have active in the blockchain space. The sector is relatively young, but despite that, about 30 of those companies have been founded in the last 3 to 4 years. They're employing over 500 people. They've raised about 50 million in funding. A big proportion of them, about 14 of them, are in the fintech space. But interestingly, we've got companies, we've got 4 of them in agri-tech, we've got another 9 in enterprise tech, and then we've got a couple in health. And some of those companies, as I said, are companies like Blocknewbie, who are doing actually self-sovereign electronic healthcare records and online identity management. We've a company in our portfolio, Chorus, using blockchain for the all-important concert ticketing, which hopefully we will get back to concerts. We've got another company, ArcNet, that's doing brand protection using blockchain. And we've got Sedici, an Irish company that's developed software infrastructure, which will help with proving identity in a distributed use case. Again, that's all for blockchain applications. So I think if we look at that Irish experience and we look at some of the initiatives that are impactful, we've got Maya on later. We've obviously got Blockchain Ireland, which is a really fantastic platform, advisory group, collaborative to what the Minister said. It's between government, multinationals, Indigenous Irish companies, and thought leaders from the sector. And I think that's a really, really important thing that countries do to foster communication and collaboration. SkillNet here in Ireland launched a master's degree program last year in blockchain, and I'll talk a little bit about training and skill sets. And then initiatives like the Disruptive Technology Investment Fund, which we in Enterprise Ireland launched. We've done 2 of them now, 90 million, 2 calls, 150 in total, and they are focused also on including key sectors like blockchain. And one of our top research centres here in the Advanced Applied Research CEDAR in data analytics have added blockchain as well as a key focus area. So I think from a challenge point of view, there's a lot of technical and regulatory challenges. We're certainly looking to the regulators and to governments and to national bodies like the EU to help build a framework, so that a regulatory framework, so that we can invest with certainty. And I think that's what investors want. Investors like ourselves do not want a free for all, which has happened in Bitcoin and in the crypto world. So it's how do we understand these use cases, and we need to develop risk, legal and compliance capabilities in our countries. And I think the regulators obviously and supervisors, I think, need a very strong narrative on the potential for public DLT technologies, getting people, you know, up to speed and understanding. Frances asked about GDPR and blockchain, and I think again this is the area of zero knowledge proofs, and I think it's you know, GDPR has to be embedded and enforced in a DLT environment, and I think it has the potential. We have the potential to do that with blockchain, creating a link between the trusted entity and the blockchain address and making it tamper proof. So look, and finally, I would say, what can the EU and national governments do? Well, I think first of all, it's about collaboration. Obviously, industry, investors, academia, we are all obviously tasked with this. But I think first of all, moving significantly to build on skills. I think software skills and digitization skills and blockchain skills within both the public sector, the private sector, and areas of the private sector that traditionally do not have those software skills. We have a massive reskilling job to do now post-pandemic, and I'm encouraged by recent data from McKinsey that they are able to successfully retrain people from backgrounds like truckers or people that were in hospitality industry, had no coding experience. On recent pilot programs, they've run 40 to 50% success rates. I think the best funding any government can give a startup is a PO. So I think engaging with pilot applications for some of these companies, and I think repurposing the existing tools we have in the EU. So we have this fantastic network of, we've a sovereign wealth fund effectively in the EIB. We have the EIF. We have programs like, as I said, the Disruptive Technology Fund. We've Horizon 2020, and we have the recent EIC. So we've all these great tools, which I think we can add mandates around key sectors like blockchain to say we want to invest in this sector alongside the private sector. And you know, a lot of countries like the US, they don't have that infrastructure. So we actually have some of the infrastructure. And then finally, I think regulate and take back control. And then finally, I was struck by the conclusion of preparing for today by a report from the Bank of International Settlements. Their final line said, while new tech has the potential to improve our lives, this is not always invariably the case. And the central banks and government authorities must be prepared to intervene if needed, because after all, cryptocurrencies piggyback on the institutional infrastructure that serves the wider financial systems, gaining a semblance of legitimacy from those links. So it clearly falls under regulators' responsibility. The book stops here, but the book also starts here. Now, of course, we should replace book with euro, but we should also not underestimate the power of government to set the standards and to drive innovation. So many thanks, Frances. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks very much, Elaine, for packing in so much and bringing us right up to date with what is happening here in Ireland. Can I just remind all our participants, the live chat function at the bottom right-hand side of your screens to pose your questions to our panel. So please do that. And I do want to remind all of our speakers that this webinar is being recorded as well. So now on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is David Wachsman. In 2015, David founded Wachsman Consultancy, a leading communication-based consultancy for the blockchain industry, with offices in New York, Dublin, and Singapore. David and his team have represented and acted as strategic consultants to more than 200 of the most indispensable companies, organizations, and projects in blockchain, And before founding this company, David led the day-to-day operations for a public relations agency in Manhattan, held roles in advertising, political affairs, and biotechnology. And David, you join us today from the United States, and you are very welcome. Looking forward to hearing your contribution. David.
Thank you so much, Frances, and thank you to the European Parliament Liaison Office in Ireland for inviting me here today. Let me start by saying that it is an honor to be part of such an incredible panel with these remarkable individuals. As mentioned, my name is David Wachsman, and I'm the founder and CEO of a global communications and strategy consultancy, proudly with offices in Ireland. We're an agency that was born out of the blockchain in 2015, and we were launched as one of the first businesses to support Bitcoin entrepreneurs seeking to rewrite the infrastructure for the entire global economy. It was a large task. The traits of security, transparency, trustlessness, and the advent of digital scarcity are game-changing qualities that have already started to make a difference. In fact, so much has changed since the founding of this firm. What was once a €5 billion industry in mid-2015 has now eclipsed 1 trillion euros in market capitalization today. In the intervening 6 years, the blockchain-related market has experienced extraordinary highs, and as many of you who would know, some terrible lows. Many viewers should also know that some blockchain-powered technologies like DeFi, otherwise known as decentralized finance, have already begun to change the way we interact with and understand finance, from the most basic forms like payments or lending to the development of sophisticated, transparent, and secure derivatives markets. This is very impactful. This intermediation in fintech has already proven to result in win-win-win scenarios: lower fees for traders, better yields for investors, and yes, more transparency for regulators. Blockchain is, after all, a record of every transaction that's happened since the very beginning. At least that's the Bitcoin blockchain and many like it. We've seen unprecedented institutional participation and mainstream cultural proliferation of Bitcoin, other digital assets, and an increasingly widespread use of DLT. Much of this, in fact, has happened and in fact been accelerated in the midst of a global pandemic. We've always known that this technology was game-changing from the outset. The reason why we were created is because there's enormous barriers to its achieving critical mass: misinformation, misunderstanding, and the market's overall lack of awareness. I can't blame anyone for this. It's very complex technology, and the founders of the tech are developers who are classically bad at communications. And it turns out that's critically important when you're trying to do something as essential and game-changing as trying to manipulate the financial sector. Some of our clients have grown from small startups into billion-dollar businesses. And in parallel, we as an agency have grown to more than 85 employees across 3 continents, with headquarters in New York, Dublin, and Singapore. We've seen that blockchain has a marked increase in institutional involvement, especially of late. Many of you may know that Square, MicroStrategy, and Tesla have joined the Bitcoin on the balance sheet brigade. They've been using a section of their balance sheet, taking some of their corporate treasury and investing in Bitcoin as a hedge asset in the event of potential inflation. While that may not be the case, I do concur in their belief that digital assets, which are empowered by blockchain, can and will be a force for good. They are absolutely a technology and indeed a financial asset with benefits. Funds and institutions are realizing this in a major way. They are putting their money, their energy, their time, their reputations into the blockchain and digital asset sector. Goldman Sachs, for instance, is ramping up a crypto trading desk. Cowen, Fidelity, BNY Mellon, and Deutsche Bank are offering custody for digital assets, or will be soon. BlackRock has authorized 2 of its largest funds to invest in Bitcoin futures. We've seen this being the case in every geography and with almost every single major financial institution. We at Wachsman are experiencing the reality of this mainstreaming of blockchain up close and personal as we're servicing increasingly extraordinary clients. We've seen this since the beginning, and I want to assure everyone here that we've seen leadership in blockchain start in Europe, and I'm convinced that that's going to be the case long into the future. As an example, we're proud to represent the government of Gibraltar in asserting its position as a leading blockchain and virtual assets hub, being the first jurisdiction globally to introduce legislation around DLT technology, which was implemented in January 1st of 2018. Another client, Hedera Hashgraph, is helping the NHS track the temperature of COVID-19 vaccines as they're transported across the United Kingdom. What we've also seen, of course, in Ireland, the ransomware attack on the HSE indicates how blockchain could be of benefit in terms of data security. Important to note, blockchain is not a panacea. It won't fix everything, but it could provide a useful tool to secure IT systems against such attacks. In fact, advanced cryptography and DLT protect data in the event of cyber attacks and prevent highly sensitive patient data from being compromised. In the financial services sector, clients like Medico are providing infrastructure to the titans of the industry, like some of those aforementioned, and BBVA and Standard Chartered. I think we're going to see a lot more like that very soon. And today we represent many of the top public companies in the sector, those trading on exchanges in the US, Canada, the UK, other exchanges throughout Europe and in Asia. Many of these companies are either built or reliant on blockchain technology for either some of their product suite, or perhaps that's part of the tech stack that makes them individually valuable in the first place. Of course, because we're talking here with so many policymakers and regulators, it should be mentioned that the environment there is also gradually coming around, and it is wonderful to see. As said by some of the other panelists here, crypto ETFs and central bank digital currencies are just two examples of developments that could either shake up, but I hope improve the global economy. Already over 100 jurisdictions have taken steps towards regulating the sector, and I'm encouraged by many of the policy discussions taking place throughout the world as well, and I hope here today on this panel. The power of blockchain to change society is very real, and I can't see what happens next, in part because of the participation of the remarkable people here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David, for those examples and the really highlighting the potential of blockchain. And I think in the discussion, it'll be very interesting to hear about the whole regulation and your experience of that and where it's heading, where it needs to head, and indeed from our other panelists as well. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. Our next speaker is Maya Santamaria from the Department of Finance in Ireland. And the team, she leads the financial advisory team in the Department of Finance. The team carries out evidence-based research in order to form, obviously, insights and input on emerging areas of financial services and technology, and make sure that they move into policy, which I think everybody is very interested in me at this stage. In 2017, she co-authored the department's virtual currencies and blockchain discussion paper, and she leads the department's working group on blockchain since early 2018. She was also a member of Blockchain Ireland Advisory Board for 2 years and organised the first government-wide public services blockchain hackathon in 2019. She's a bureau member of the OECD's Committee on Financial Markets, and she worked in banking and insurance in the private sector before joining the ministry. So you're in there at the cutting edge of how government is approaching this, Maya. So we look forward to hearing your insights, and no doubt we'll have questions for you later. Over to you, Maya.
Many thanks, Frances, for asking me to join this webinar, and for the chance to give back a little bit to, I think it's to Europe and in its framework. I did come to Ireland many moons ago on an Erasmus program, so this is hopefully me giving back some of that goodwill that I was afforded a long time ago. Yes, I did spend over 20 years in financial services, and joining in the Department of Finance in advisory capacity. Specifically, I was asked to actually use that experience for horizon scanning. So blockchain came onto our radar in 2017, when at the time Bitcoin was bordering $20,000, which is nothing compared to current prices. But in truth, Bitcoin seems to be, or the headlines that Bitcoin generate, the way that people get attracted to the discussion on blockchain technology. As more research got into blockchain, and particularly what was happening with Bitcoin and Bitcoin was, for me, it became quite real and apparent that this was a technology that was fundamentally going to radicalize how the finance world is structured. with my finance hat on, I probably would equate it maybe to going back to when paper money was invented of first use, or even when the double entry system in finance was first invented. I won't go into details though of how we went from there to today, but what I'd really like to focus maybe is, yes, there was the finance side to the blockchain technology that brought me to look at it and certainly bring it to the attention of the minister and for us to, and the Department of Finance to look into it. But on the side was the potential that the technology had for good, for the society. And it was in that vein that I also got involved on site with BlockW. I know that the previous panelists have touched on that potential, but just give me just 2 minutes to explain what BlockW was and why I think it's important and why I think it's a great way of actually really bringing in together all the other different strains. BlockW came up in the very first early stages from our intention. There was a few people, a few women of us in 2017, 2018, who really wanted to learn more about blockchain technology. I think David Wachsman has actually mentioned, you know, a lot of these developers are developers, that's the way they are. Back then they would probably meet up, usually would be some underground plays in Dublin, and it would be late in the evening and it would be pizzas and beers. Coming in from a non-technology background, it felt daunting to be able to go into a room where such experts, technologists, and ask what, you know, you kind of sometimes think are actually just silly questions. And yet you want to be able to learn that technology and see, how can I do it? How can I actually utilize it in my day-to-day work? There's that curiosity to it. It was this curiosity and this need to want to know more, but also to help other people who were in the same situation that led us to create BlockW. So there was 4 or 5 women. This was meant to be a women-led, and this was a women-led initiative that was open to absolutely everybody. So it wasn't just a women only. And the key aim of the initiative was to demystify the technology, to allow for a safe space for people to come in and explain their experiences and questions being asked, and literally just bring about a network. And this is what it's been doing. BlockW has been, I would say, fundamental in terms of actually bringing the technology to a lot of people who otherwise would not have been comfortable in actually getting to understand the basics. A lot of the women who created BlockW came from diverse professional backgrounds themselves. So we were different ages. Some of us were we had lawyers, we had financiers, we had people coming from academia, a couple of developers. And that in itself actually allowed for people to come in and join the events to see, well, if she's doing it, so can I. On our first event, for example, the attendance was already 50-50. I said it really was open up to everyone. And we also saw that there were people attending, coming in maybe from financial services sector themselves, or maybe engineering, but they also felt that maybe blockchain was just a bit too threatening or too difficult for them to approach it in a non-technology manner. So why is this important, and why I wanted to bring it up? In the context of Ireland and Europe, and I know that Sakhib actually mentioned it as well, and again, David have actually mentioned it as well, there's an inherent risk in the lack of education, misinformation and misunderstanding. It's particularly critical when it actually comes to policy formation and also maybe regulation. So through actually improving an access to validated data, and also allowing a safe space where people from different backgrounds, whether it be policymakers, regulators, and from the blockchain community, to have those discussions about what the technology is and isn't, what can be done and is not possible to do, you come up with an informed policy position, an informed regulation, or a regulation that's fit for purpose. And this is, I think, of absolutely critical, utmost importance, because again, as my previous panelists have actually mentioned, the pace at which the technology is evolving is so fast. We do not have time to really slow down or just kind of take a wait and see approach. We really need to be at the forefront of actually supporting the technology and supporting the innovation. One last point that I wanted to maybe make as well, is against the idea of the blockchain technology for good, utilizing the technology for educations, but also bringing in topics that are not naturally financial services topics, but potentially that are of importance for us as a society to actually either meet the SDGs, or effectively improve our society. And I just wanted to make reference to the fact that we had a BlockW event where we had several BlockW events through Blockchain Ireland Week this week. And of particular interest, there was one where there was a company, HeHub, where effectively blockchain technology on an app in your phone is being utilized to, for example, to take pictures or videos and timestamp those on a blockchain, so that these could actually be utilized as evidence in case of a legal case, if that happens, against domestic abuse. This is not a blockchain type use that you normally get to see that actually make headlines, and yet is of utmost imperative to obviously fight against the increase, for example, of domestic violence cases that have actually have come up, as unfortunately as a result of the pandemic crisis and more people staying indoors. Another example of a blockchain for good, where we've also been very happily and heavily involved in BookW, has certainly been the use of the application of blockchain to food traceability, potentially to also help. An example of that might be Moe Coffee in Ireland, where you can literally go in and tip directly the coffee producer, coffee roaster of that coffee, so that there's a direct link between that coffee that you're enjoying and that person is doing it. But other examples, I think someone actually mentioned ATEC earlier on, are also in the cross-border payments as well. And actually, how do we bring this down, the cost of cross-border transfers, which, as we know, is another one of the SDGs goals. So all in all, context of time as well, just to wrap it up, the interesting thing about working with blockchain and leading the team or the working group in blockchain over these last 3 years in the Department of Finance is, yes, we've certainly been able to see the importance and the necessity to provide clarity and clarity on the regulatory perimeter of, say, crypto assets, digital assets, and so forth. But the absolute necessity as well to help out through BlockW and through our collaboration with Blockchain Ireland to improve education, to improve understanding, and so that how that actually feeds to the other pillars necessary from a public sector perspective that would actually support and underpin the development of policy and regulation. I hope that's okay, and I look forward to any questions from the audience.
Thanks very much again, Maya. Well done on founding BlockW. We certainly, it's one of the topics we discuss in Europe is the whole inequalities that we're seeing, surprisingly actually, in relation to technology and gender, and the work that has to be done, and also pointing out that broader application, which is so important. But look, we're on to our final speaker, and then we'll go to our questions. Our final speaker is Peteris Zilgavis. Peteris is the head of unit for digital innovation and blockchain in the Digital Single Market Directorate in DG Connect, and is co-chair of the European Commission FinTech Task Force. From 1997 to 2005, he was deputy head of the bioethics department of the Council of Europe in its Directorate of Legal Affairs. In addition, he has held various positions in the Latvian Civil Service, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Environment. He was the senior environmental law advisor to the World Bank Russian Federation Environmental Management Project, and was a regional environmental specialist for the Baltic countries in the World Bank. So he brings vast experience to this emerging and challenging issue of blockchain technology. And thank you so much, Peteris. I'm really delighted that you're the European Commission perspective to us today. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and it's a pleasure to be here. It would only be a pleasure to actually be a pleasure more to be actually in Ireland, but I think we'll make do with this at this point. I mean, from the bio that you very graciously read, you might ask, I mean, how have I been in blockchain? This is something that has been for me a natural progression of having worked on law and emerging technologies since about 1990, so perhaps too much experience. I start giving away my age. But I was a visiting fellow at St. Anthony's College and University of Oxford in 2013 to 2014, and looking at innovation policy. And really at that time, I started focusing very heavily on blockchain and the fintech ecosystem. We heard that for a lot of us, fintech and the financial sector was the way that we got into blockchain. I wasn't different in that case. It was something that was a natural progression from looking at that time at Bitcoin and then some of the other uses of blockchain. Since then, we've moved on, especially as the European Commission, very much onto other uses of blockchain, still often in the financial sector, but in many other economic sectors. Very many interesting things have already been said on which I can agree to a very great extent. And so I will try to target exactly two things that we're doing at the European Commission that might be very interesting for you, and in some cases doing at the European Commission together with Ireland and the other member states. Firstly, we have a EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum, which holds now virtual workshops, which you can always join. We have one coming up on decentralized governance, including the decentralized autonomous organizations, and a report coming out very soon on central bank digital currencies, which is another hot issue, and one in which I participate in the working groups between the European Commission and the European Central Bank, which is working on the assessment of the legal, political, and technical issues related to a digital euro, if we are to have one. Next, we have a European blockchain partnership of 29 European countries, including Ireland, obviously, but all the EU member states. So this blockchain partnership is both running a current regulatory sandbox in building a European blockchain services infrastructure with use cases linked to self-sovereign identity, to diplomas, to regulatory reporting, RegTech, and is deploying those starting this year. There will also be, under the Digital Europe program, in the same framework, a regulatory sandbox that will be open to innovators from the member states who want to live test their innovations together with supervisors and regulators from the different member states and from the European Commission. So this is something that will be coming online very soon. We're also very active in the area of standards, ISO Technical Committee 307 on blockchain, together with Ireland and other member states, and also in the areas of skills and investments in research. If you are a researcher in blockchain, keep your eye out for calls, especially on next generation internet. We also heard about the decentralized internet and decentralized management of data. Very much interesting areas for us. And to finish up, because I know I'm what stands between us and the opportunity to ask questions, where then we couldn't use a regulatory sandbox, or where it wasn't satisfying enough, applying the current law still left some kind of lacuna, some kind of hole in the market. We have now launched targeted legislative initiatives. Minister Paschal Donohue already mentioned the ones on markets in crypto assets, which is in some ways the most prominent one. ensuring that not just the security tokens, which are covered by MiFID, but also stable coins, as we call them, asset reference tokens, and significant asset reference tokens, as well as payment tokens and utility tokens, are covered in a risk-based framework. So as there's lower risk, there's lower requirements, less regulatory burden. And as there's higher risk, then there are more requirements to fulfill. It's also a passporting regulation. So once you have fulfilled the requirements in a member state, you can passport to the entire single market. Then going to pilot, which is a regulatory sandbox plus for market infrastructures, and actually goes beyond a regulatory sandbox because it's not just live testing on the basis of proportionality, but it also can remove the requirement of a centralized security depository for market infrastructures based on blockchain solutions. Then we have upcoming a regulation on digital identity, which will include the enabling of self-sovereign identity, legally putting that into the accepted trust services of the European Union. And finally, in the upcoming Data Act, we're looking to ensure that smart contracts are not fragmented across borders, and that we have a single market for using smart contracts everywhere in the EU, and that we don't have a set of national legal norms coming up and making it less seamless to work across borders with this technological application. We do not have, and we will not have, a regulation on blockchain, but as you see, where there are applications of blockchain or distributed ledger technologies that do need to be enabled, or where there's some protection element for consumers, citizens, etc., we are targeting the application and what is different about it in order to increase legal clarity and legal certainty. So thank you very much for your attention. And as other speakers, I am here at your service to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Peteris. That was very interesting. And you finished off speaking there, the legal situation. And I'm going to put a question from Emma McLaughlin to the panel, which says, it's a very interesting one, I think. As a former Minister for Justice, I was wondering about this. In relation to law, what difficulty would there be in converting legal instruments and the EU's laws onto a blockchain that will mark and register key rulings and amendments, and also document on ledger the history of those amendments? Could we use smart contracts and legally binding and verified API sources to automate processes? So that's kind of a general question there about, you know, the legal, I suppose, the transition onto blockchain of the data, and much of the potential seems to be about, you know, putting legal documentation. Certainly one area of it is if you're doing land registries or something like this, as they've done in Sweden, we heard. What are the challenges of the transition for all the players to move into using blockchain for legally and to put these contracts in blockchain? Who'd like to start with that? Peteris, I think you might be the person who mentioned law the most, so maybe you might just make some comments on that, and then if anyone else would like to come in, maybe those on the front line, I'd like to hear what your experience is.
Well, I am ready to comment on it, but I'm sure there's also comment from the distinguished speakers. One is that we are addressing the smart contracts, as I said, probably in the upcoming Data Act. And this is to ensure that there is a legal framework and that we don't have fragmentation. So that's a first step. And also this is linked to the standardization actions taking place, technical standardization in ETSI and Sensenelec, which are the European standardization organizations, and also in the International Standardization Organization at the world level. And this is to ensure that we don't have many different variants of the smart contract or demand very many different ones. We are also deploying a use case this year in the European blockchain services infrastructure with the European Court of Auditors, which is the publication of audit documents that are supposed to be publicly available on the blockchain to increase their public availability. So in one aspect, we are already doing this. Then we're working closely with our colleagues in Directorate General Justice, not only on the aforementioned legislative initiative, but also more broadly with a study, with several studies, including one with the European Parliament, to look precisely at how the legal frameworks utilizing smart contracts could address a whole set of the issues brought up by your former Justice Minister. I have to say the questions are ones that are so rich in their depth that they could be a conference of perhaps several days themselves. So I will not have time to go into them today. But I think that one thing that we do have to keep in mind, that a smart contract, because it is an automated contract, you probably do not want to use it for everything. In the areas where you really do need the flexibility of a contract to take into account very fluid situations in markets or in people's lives, then probably, at least I would say as my personal opinion, for the time being, you want to use a contract method, a civil law method of today. But the smart contracts can do a lot of things either in the financial services or in everyday life, that because of their foreseeability or the foreseeability of implementing a wish of the two parties of the contract without so many possibilities for needing to adjust it often, that this is perhaps an efficient tool.
Thank you, Peteris. Could I ask Sakhib to come in? I mean, you're working with government, Sakhib, and lots of different agencies. What's your experience of this? And then maybe David would come in. And Sakhib, while I'm asking you, there's a question here: is IBM is with the proof of trust? Are they presently implementing your technology in any areas that came in? And also question, David, how has the perception of the industry changed since 2015, and how do you see it developing? More of that. That's from the first question is from Ellis McGrath, second is from Lee Murphy. So Sakhib, I'll go over to you for any comments you might have to make in general on the question of moving to blockchain.
Thank you, Frances. And I'll answer in two parts. Firstly, to address the legal aspects, as proof of trust is actively playing quite a strong role when it comes to implementing legal infrastructure and protection of the users of smart contracts. In fact, one of our patents allows us to manage disputes on smart contracts. And as was mentioned, smart contracts are automated, but we do need measures in there to provide legal provisioning. We need to be able to set jurisdiction and protect consumers from off-chain events impacting the integrity of the arrangement. And that is exactly what we're working on right now, actively. What we're doing is we're building a bridge between large legal firms to be able to manage and arbitrate disputes on-chain and off-chain using blockchain technology at scale, effectively providing an independent resolution service as a modern response to very modern age disputes. And to answer your second question, yes, we've got a very healthy and strong relationship with IBM. Not only are they a reseller of our services, helping us to reach governments and corporate entities, but they actually use our application internally as well. Our patented methodology for distributed consensus is being used to vet code and review code to remove weakness from contracts, smart contracts, and general code review within the entire innovation department within IBM.
Great, thank you. David, the question to you in terms of I think Elaine touched on this as well, the change perception. And I suppose Mia in addressing the broader range of applications moving out from fintech and financial services generally. What's your sense of your perception of how things have changed, the view of the industry, from outside the industry? How do you think it's changed?
It's changed quite a lot. I think we should first set the stage with how things were perceived in 2014 and 2015 when I entered the sector. In late 2013, there was an infamous hack of an exchange based in Japan that resulted in essentially a 2-year bear market for Bitcoin, which is the first instance and use case of blockchain technology. And this resulted in, for many people, including VCs who are no longer investing in the sector, for retail investors who perhaps had invested in through unregulated exchanges and lost a lot of money, a 2-year bear market where there was not nearly as much innovation as there should have been, with the exception of some small startups like this organization called Ethereum that were inventing things like smart contracts, or at least they were inventing new ways to use smart contracts because of blockchain technology. And what's happened since 2015 is we've seen this, once again, these bull and bear cycles in the digital asset sector have resulted in increased or decreased interest in blockchain technology overall. It doesn't and shouldn't make sense. That is to say, the price of Bitcoin should have nothing to do with whether blockchain can improve the trading of digital securities and the settlement of securities or commodities or FX, and yet it does. And as a result of the fact there's been a huge resurgence in the last couple of years, with Bitcoin eclipsing the previously high market capitalization and itself eclipsing $1 trillion in market cap earlier this year, we've seen enormous interest in the overall sector. And this results in enhanced R&D, enhanced government oversight, which is both a blessing and a curse, and certainly a lot of innovation in the space. You're seeing human capital pour in, you're seeing financial capital pour in, and this allows for blockchain, which is really a horizontal technology, to become a very useful thing. As mentioned earlier, we've seen it applied in healthcare. We've seen it in charity. ATEC, certainly one of those firms. There are many 501c3s in the US that are now trying to figure out how to use blockchain technology, whether to track and trace donors or otherwise to help perhaps with international remittances. And I'll conclude here by simply saying that the perception today of blockchain technology, I think, is stronger than some may assert. On the front lines every day, I'm seeing that reporters, that media are now devoting more and more reporters to the sector because there's a lot of public interest in what's going on in not just Bitcoin, not just other digital assets, but the use of blockchain technology. And I think that because the eyes are here, research, development, and mainstream adoption will follow.
Thanks, David. I'm going to go to Mia now. There's a question, Mia, from Eva Short. Can you comment on any upcoming legislation for the regulation of blockchain in terms of its financial applications and cryptocurrencies in Ireland? To the heart of your job then, Mia, what legislation is going to come out? What's the regulation going to be? Where are we heading? What can you say about that?
Yeah, well, actually, Peteris.
Yes, Maya, just before I go to you, there's also a question suggesting that we're a bit hostile. It's from David Mangan, I think, saying that we're hostile. I'll play devil's advocate here, as David has. Ireland is viewed as a blockchain hostile jurisdiction. Is the government going to take any steps to ensure that Irish blockchain businesses are not refused bank accounts and other basic business services? So a query, I'm sure you wouldn't agree that Ireland is hostile, but it is a question to you. So what would your response be to that? And I'll ask Elaine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, Elaine and all the example of companies funded by Alantic Bridge, not to mention Enterprise Ireland, I would say that's very difficult to marry up with this perception of Ireland being hostile. And also, I think it's very important to make a difference between cryptocurrencies-based companies and blockchain-based companies. And in here, then, it is and has been a case, and I would say it is not just in Ireland. I think it's been the case in many other member states in Europe, where financial institutions may have withdrawn current account services to cryptocurrency or cryptocurrency service providers on the basis of risk or perceived risk in the underlying business. So as I said, I do perceive the cryptocurrency piece being just one of the applications of blockchain, and I think it's very dangerous to actually confuse the two. I mean, at the end of the day, a financial institution, a credit institution, is a private sector, is a profit-making or profit-maximizing entity. And if they see perceived risk in an underlying model, business model. It's up to them within the credit institution risk profile to choose maybe to provide services or not. I'm not saying I'm defending, I'm just saying I think I understand the position with my 20 odd years having spent it in banking. So I hope that kind of answers. I think there's a perception maybe, but I think it would be that perception is actually misplaced, and it is very important that we say that we do really clearly separate what a cryptocurrency based is and what a blockchain based company would be. We have thriving blockchain based companies, and if we were not a blockchain, I would say, accepting and fostering economy. I don't know of any other finance ministers in EU members who actually would be this open and have to openly to support the development and understanding of the technology, and he's done that consistently over 3 years. So if there's other examples, please put your hand up, because I'd like to know and how that had that finance ministry supporting that minister. I said I do not know of any other ones.
Maya, and the legislation
yeah.
that's planned, how do we see that?
Yeah, and on that point, and sorry, that's why I would make such a difference between the cryptocurrency and the blockchain piece. There isn't, and we cannot legislate for a technology. You know, that's clear. I mean, there's not going to be a regulation for blockchain overall. In case of cryptocurrencies, and Peteris has already mentioned, and what Minister Donohue also mentioned it. We are just about, actually tomorrow, we're going on to probably a very strong working part in the market in crypto assets. It's going to be regulation. Once we've actually agreed general agreements and it's gone through the normal discussions at EU level, the intention is to actually have something within a couple of years at EU level. As Peteris has actually mentioned as well, you know, passporting will come in through, it will be regulation, so there's no need for transposition, there's no delay between a directive and transposing to national perspective. So it will happen. We're in the throes of it. It's been a really busy 9 months discussing with other member states the details of that draft, and when that is approved, it will be instantly applicable to crypto assets and crypto asset service providers also in Ireland.
Thanks very much, Mia. Elaine, would you like to come in? And there's also a question about safeguarding privacy and you know, private details, and how can that sort of be taken care of within the blockchain? Are you opening up data to a lot of people? But I guess that is dealt with in the whole way blockchain is approached and in the development of it. But Elaine, you might like to comment.
Look, I think, Frances, yeah, I think Maya has given some really good points there. To David's point, I mean, Hostile's probably just been devil's advocate. I think, though, on the crypto side, yes, the country, the government and the regulators are extremely cautious, and certainly that caution has probably been the right approach. But at the same time, on the blockchain side, I mean, on this call here today, you have David, you have Sakhib, both with their businesses, international businesses, and both have a base in Ireland as well, and they're in the blockchain sector. So I would say to you, we don't see any resistance, quite the reverse. I think what we're trying to do in Ireland is speed up the understanding, the adoption and the investment in the sector. And to something that Petra said there about the sandbox, I think that's a fantastic development, because, you know, we just recently, as we talked about this HSC health hack that we had, cyber attack, and my understanding is that to resolve and to test a lot of the systems, actually the central bank's digital sandbox was used, and I think there's a huge role for regulators and central banks to use these digital sandboxes that they've built in collaboration with companies like David and Proof of Trust and our companies. So, and then on the actual approach for privacy, I think privacy is one of the biggest challenges of our time. You know, there's so much data out there. There's an awareness now building, and effectively in these ledgers, these are effectively digital ledgers. I mean, people get very confused about this technology. They confuse blockchain with Bitcoin, but blockchain is in effect a distributed database, just like we have an Oracle database. It's a distributed one today in blocks, and then they're all chained together, and then it's distributed. And that's the key. The key idea is that if it's spread out and decentralized and not in the center, you know, you won't have the type of attacks that we've had, and also privacy and random IDs are embedded into that block. So that in itself poses a huge challenge. As we can see in Bitcoin, the anonymity has caused huge problems from a law enforcement perspective, and has enabled a huge amount of effectively illicit funds, etc., from unsavory participants, and enable that. And I don't think that that is acceptable or sustainable for the future. So I think the big challenge we do have, I think we can overcome. We can embed GDPR, we can embed privacy controls, etc. But I think the ID aspect and the anonymity is something that we have to also deal with. We can't, you know, have blockchain applications that governments, I suppose, cannot ultimately. There has to be a centralized, there has to be control, I guess.
Thanks, Elaine. A couple of questions before we finish. There's a question here, Sakhib, from you. You mentioned Astra, I think it is, a new product called Astra. Could you say more about this? That's one question. We have a comment from Peteris, who's saying we need to have more specialists and developers. And he's talking in the discussion, and he's talking the difficulty of communicating this to the public. Now, I think that's a very interesting question, and I'm going to conclude on this by perhaps asking everyone to come in on it. I'm interested in how we make sure that blockchain moves to the public services arena. And I'm wondering what your experience is, particularly, I suppose, David and Sakhib, but others as well, about, you know, governments taking, if you like, ownership of this and being willing to move with it. What are the challenges and the barriers? Because I guess until governments really, you know, provide public services in this way and really take hold of this technology, it's going to be hard for the public to understand what it's about. And that's maybe a final thought I have about how do we help people to understand this technology? I suppose it's about seeing the benefits of it. But look, I'll ask each of you to maybe make a final comment, and then I will conclude this webinar as we are out of time. So let me start with David, and then I'll go to Sakhib.
Thank you so much,
David.
Frances, and thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Frances, and thank you to all the panelists for your extraordinary comments here today. We've seen a robust debate, and that's exactly what there should be when it comes to topics as challenging, complex, and impactful as blockchain technology. I think it's the road ahead is going to be paved with some trial and error. I'm appreciative of the fact that the Irish government, for one, of the ministry, has embraced blockchain technology and has really understood it at its core. I think that without education, without really understanding how the technology works, it's very easy to misidentify either the benefits or the drawbacks of technologies like blockchain and the way it's used, whether it's in the digital asset space, whether it's used for trade finance, for provenance, for whatever it may be. And I simply want to conclude by saying that I do believe that Bitcoin, I do believe that other digital currencies, digital assets can be and are forces for good. And I do hope that more education, more competent service providers out there, more trusted ones, perhaps with clear regulation. Earlier, we heard about the term legal certainty. I think that if there's more legal certainty for businesses that are built on blockchain or related to blockchain technology, I think that's going to result in a lot more trust from the public, from regulators, from policymakers, and from others. But we do need that type of legal certainty that right now doesn't exist everywhere. I guess let me end there. I think legal certainty would be exactly what we'd want to see in the blockchain space.
Thanks, David. I move now to Sakhib, a particular question for you and Astra, but also your view on, you know, the barriers and how we overcome them so it's more widely seen.
Thank you, Frances. And I'd like to echo David's thoughts on thanking everybody for their participation today, and certainly for the audience and their questions at the same time. So Astra is our product designed to bring trust, legal trust, and acts as a legal layer within the DeFi system, so within decentralized finance, open to public blockchains, where we're able to bring in dispute resolution and consumer protection to public transactions. So working on the public networks, the Ethereums, the Polkadots, the Cardanos, really bringing in more institutional practice within that sphere, and also protecting the consumers from the abuse and from hack attempts and anything that may become erroneous in a transaction is what Astra is designed to do. It's a token-backed technology. It operates in a similar way that Ethereum does, and the token is also called Astra. To talk about education, Proof of Trust is playing an active role globally. We're bringing out innovation centers from nation to nation to help build the bridge between communication in government and the private sector, and how we can inform and educate the public at scale. Blockchain has numerous immeasurable benefits into the ways that it can help the world, and my and the other colleagues on the call today have mentioned so many various areas that it can provide benefit. And that's part of Proof of Trust's mission, to explain and elaborate in the ways that can help both government and the public in their everyday lives, not just from a financial perspective. And we're very pleased to play a leading role with our global footprint. So thank you for today, Frances. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Delighted to have you on the call, Waseem. Elaine, final thought?
I think, Frances, I wouldn't underestimate the ability of people to adopt technologies when it's in their interest and there's a benefit. I think, I think anecdotally, a couple of months ago, I'm in a running group, and they were telling me on one of the runs how they were all buying Bitcoin on Revolut. And they were all making small little, watching it daily. And not only that, but one of the girls said to me, "Oh, sure, my 85-year-old mother's doing it as well." So, and I had no clue what a Bitcoin was or what the underlying technology was. But it did strike me. Now, obviously, that's dangerous as well, and that's what I said to them. But I think use cases. So I think if governments start adopting this technology, it will give, for some of these use cases, whether it's passport issuances or whether it's smart contracts, or the example or the question that Emma asked about, which sounds like a good application for the EU, for the legislative, tracking legislation, etc., and amendments. When we start getting these deployments, I think people will see the benefits. It'll build trust, and obviously communication and education, and events like today are a huge part of that. And that's why the 200 people plus that have dialed in, obviously have an interest, and will also be the spreaders of understanding why this is a good technology.
You're absolutely right, Elaine. When you think how we've all adapted in the last year and done probably, I saw the minister saying the other day, we've done in 10 months what we thought would take 10 years in terms of in terms of connecting with one another around the world and using our digital technology. Mia, another final word from you.
Yeah, well, obviously to echo thanks to you, Frances, for the opportunity to speak today, I have to say, and for those that have tuned in, and to pick up the baton for where Elaine just left it. I do think we should not underestimate the power of citizens to just get up and go with something that's useful and it's carried in the pocket and it's easy to use. I think the future from public services perspective is going to be utilizing the blockchain without anyone even knowing it's blockchain. People don't need to know. And a perfect example of that, and it was actually discussed on the day one in Blockchain Ireland Week, was a health pass. And actually in the same presentation, someone mentioned never, I think the expression was never have a crisis go to waste. And it actually particularly meant, well, here it is in the midst of the pandemic. We've all been doing everything virtually. We totally know how to do things literally digitally. Can we just bypass and just go in with what we want by utilizing the blockchain without having to maybe go through that legacy issue. And let's be creative with the technology. And it doesn't have to be, as people using their phone, they have their details, for example, for a vaccine on a digital wallet in their phone. Do they need to know is blockchain? What they need to know is they trust it. They know the data is not going to be tampered with. It's going to be immutable and it will be protected. And I think that's where from a public service perspective, that's certainly with the holy grail in terms of accepting the technology by our citizens and improving the experience is going to come from. In terms of the education, sorry, I'll stop there.
You're okay with me. A great comment, very optimistic, I think, approach to it, very, very practical. Peteris, final comment from you.
All kinds of great comments, so I'll try not to repeat any of what has just been said. I think let's utilize the best benefits, the potential of the technology to enable citizens, small and medium enterprises, startups, also our European industry, to be able to manage their own data, to be able to manage their own identity, and really to take control of their digital lives, and to improve economic performance, as well as realize social innovation.
Thank you so much. And let me finish the session by thanking each and every one of you for your time today, your expertise, the contribution you've made to this webinar. And as Elaine said, we have over 200 people who've been listening, but obviously many of them experts as well, who will spread the word, I'm sure. And we'll have further debates and discussion on this. I think as a legislator, I certainly think it's very exciting to hear about this technology and really, you know, the potential to improve services and to enable people to do things, you know, maybe daily things in a cheaper, more secure way and more transparent way. And there's a lot of potential there, I can certainly see. Let me conclude by thanking the European Parliament office in Dublin. It's always a pleasure to run a webinar with them. To thank the head of the office, James Temple-Smith, and also Patrick O'Riordan, who's been involved in the preparation of the webinar, and of course Conor Glynn from my own office, who has done Trojan work. It's been a pleasure hearing what has been said today, and no doubt far more discussions on this exciting technology in the time ahead. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Take care, stay safe. Thank you.